Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Rabia Mahmood and welcome back to lecture number 29. Today we are going to start with almost the same topic that we were discussing in our previous lecture. The previous lecture was about world Englishes, and today we are going to move one step ahead. We are going to look at the world Englishes, or at the varieties of the Englishes that are present in the world, but we are one step ahead in the sense that we are also going to look at the approaches to the world Englishes, because in our previous lecture we have not done this thing. So that's why I just wanted to show you, I just wanted to share with you that how many approaches of world Englishes are there, what are the ways, what are the methods of teaching them, and what are the results of these approaches to the world Englishes. Well, let's start today's lecture, and initially I would be giving you a brief introduction to the world Englishes, and then we'll be moving on. This brief introduction might be a kind of recapitulation, but yet we'll try to move on and we'll try to look at different things. Yes, the expression world Englishes is capable of a range of meanings and interpretations. Yes, this is what we know, that world English is the word, the very word only, world Englishes. It can be interpreted, it can be looked, it can be analyzed, it can be studied in different ways. It is very open to interpretations. In the first sense, perhaps the term functions to refer to a wide range of different approaches to the description and the analysis of Englishes worldwide. Firstly, we are saying, actually we are looking at different interpretations, we are looking at different meanings that we can get from this word world Englishes. We are saying that in the first sense, perhaps the term functions to refer to a wide range of differing approaches to the description and analysis of English. Wide range of differing approaches. When we when we hear the word world Englishes, and one thing comes to our mind, and perhaps we say that we are going to talk about different approaches to what? To the description and the analysis. The two main aspects are description and analysis of Englishes worldwide. We are not going to look at the language of just one English, rather we are going to look at the description and the analysis of different kind of Englishes that are present in the worldwide. The two main aspects of these approaches are, the first one is description, where we are describing the things, and the second is analysis, where we are analyzing it. We are not describing is actually a very surface level thing, a very apparent kind of thing, where we just focus on describing it, whereas analysis is more in-depth, is more detailed one, where we are trying to explore the inner structures of the language. So in one sense we can say perhaps we are trying to look at the descriptions as well as the analysis of different varieties of Englishes that are present in the world. Some other scholars, for example, they favor a discussion of world English in the singular, and also employ terms such as global English and international language. If we talk about this term as world English, that is a singular term, they also employ terms such as global English and international English, while others adopt the same terms in their plural forms. The others, on one hand, the scholars are going to favor it in the singular form, whereas there are some scholars who are going to favor it in the plural form. For example, global English and the international English, as and the others adopt it as the plural form. They would call it global Englishes as the international Englishes. These are different expressions that are used, that different scholars think about this thing. Indeed, in recent years, a plethora of terminology has come into use. A plethora, a bundle, a heap of terminologies, a heap of the jargons is in use about this thing. For example, include English as an international auxiliary language. The first one is that it is international auxiliary language. Then some people say that it's a global English language. Auxiliary is something that is helping the other. It is international language where International in the sense, for example, the people would be having their first and the second language, and the third language would be English language, that they will be using in their own specific context to refer as a helping language, to interact on the international levels. Global English and the global Englishes, international Englishes, localized variety of English, new varieties of English, non-native varieties of English, second language varieties of English, world Englishes, new Englishes, alongside such more traditional terms as ESL and EFL. EFL as English as a second language and EFL as English as a foreign language. These are different range of varieties of Englishes. It is a heap of the terms that have been coined, that have been explored regarding English language. In a second narrower sense, the term is used to specifically refer to the new Englishes found in the Caribbean and in the West African and the East African societies such as Nigeria and Kenya, and to such Asian Englishes as Hong Kong English, Indian English, Pakistani English, Singaporean English. This actually world English refers to those Englishes that are taking place, the new varieties of English. In the third sense, world Englishes refer to the wide-ranging approach to the study of English language worldwide, particularly associated with Braj B. Kachru's and other scholars working in the world Englishes paradigm. This is the same paradigm that we have already discussed. The Kachru, Braj B. Kachru, who actually who gave the circle theory, and who talked about the three circles of English. The first one was inner circle, then the outer circle, and the third was expandable circle that was expanding. And he was saying that within the first circle, the inner circle, there is you can say the native countries, and then in the second circle the status of English is as ESL, English as second language, and in the third one it is English as the foreign language, EFL. When Kachru and Smith took over the editorship of the journal World Languages in Language English in 1985, it was retitled to the World Englishes, and Kachru and Smith's explanation for this was that World Englishes embodies a new idea, a new credo, for which the plural Englishes was significant. Kachru and Smith, the two important people who are carrying their research, who are carrying out their studies in the field of world Englishes, actually that world Englishes embodies a new idea, a new credo. They are trying to, they said that they changed the title of one journal by saying that because this world Englishes, this word is something that is new idea, that has something new, some new innovation, a new credo is there in it, for which the plural Englishes was significant. And in this word world Englishes, they said that yes, the plural word of English is really very, very significant, because it is referring to a new range of the varieties of Englishes that are being introduced in this age. Look what Kachru and Smith said in 1985. They said Englishes, the word Englishes, we are talking about the plural word Englishes. It symbolizes the functional and the formal variation in the language and its international acculturation. For example, in West Africa, in Southern Africa, in East Africa, in South Asia, in Southeast Asia, in the West Indies, in the Philippines, in the traditional English using countries, the USA, the UK, Australia, Canada and New Zealand. It symbolizes the functional and formal variation in the language. The functional and the formal. There is a variation in the language on the level of the functions of language. We are going to discuss it in our upcoming lectures, that what are the functions of language and what is all that. Just for your understanding, the functions that a language perform in the study, we are going to actually look at that English symbolizes the functional and the formal variation in the language. if there is a variation that is coming within the language on the level of the functions and on different formal levels. So we can say that it refers to the plurality of the words, that is Englishes. The language now belongs to those who use it as their first language and to those who use it as an additional language, whether in its standard form or in its localized forms. Yes, the language now belongs to those who use it as their first language. It refers to those people who are using it as a first, and to those who use it as an additional, means the phenomena of world Englishes, it is so enriching, it is so far-reaching that world Englishes refers to the people, to the speakers of English language who are the first, for whom English is their first language, and it also refers to the people, to those speakers for whom English is their third language as well. Wherever in its standard form or in its localized form, means it refers to every kind of English variety that is present, whether that for the people who have it as their first language and for the people who have it as their second or the third language. The English studies approach, as I said to you today earlier, in that we are going to look at the different approaches to English. So the first approach to English is the English studies approach. Let's see that what does this approach say and what are its different significant features regarding the concept of world Englishes. The English studies approach to the world Englishes has developed historically from the description of English traditions, which dates back at least to the late 19th century, and the work of the scholars such as, these are the name of the different scholars. Otto Jespersen, do you remember the name of this person? Otto Jespersen. We discussed him in the very initial lectures. Yes, when we discussed the theories of origin, I told you that the 5 theories were given by a person, and the name of that person was Otto Jespersen. Yes, Daniel Jones, Charles Onions, Henry Sweets, and Henry Wilde. This is actually, this approach is the English studies approach to the world Englishes. Yes, we were discussing the English studies approach, and we were saying that the English studies approach to the world Englishes has developed historically from the description of English tradition. It is coming from the description of English tradition, and it dates back to the late 19th century. And the key figures who worked in this English studies approach, they are these peoples: Henry Bradley, Otto Jespersen, Daniel Jones, Charles Onions, etc. More recently, this approach may be exemplified by the work of the contemporary British linguist. But if we talk about the very recent works, about the very recent people who have worked in this field, in the English studies approach, they are Robert Burchfield, David Crystal, a very big name in the history in English language, especially in the contemporary English language. The word contemporary means of the same era, of the same age. David Crystal actually has written extensively about, language, linguistics, about so many things. There is a very famous encyclopedia by David Crystal, and the name of that encyclopedia is the Cambridge Encyclopedia of Linguistics by David Crystal. That is actually the reference book. That is the main book that I asked you to please buy. It is available in the markets. You can go and buy that encyclopedia. This is, although it's a very thick book, it's but still it is full of the knowledge. It is the treasure of the knowledge of the language. That's why I myself prefer that book. I have recommended that book for you as well. So the works of David Crystal are really enormous in the field of history of English language. Then Sidney Greenbaum is another important name. Tom MacArthur, Quark and Wells. These are very recent writers, very recent people who are working in this English studies approach, and they're really very famous. Let's see that what they have got to say and how are they making a contribution towards this field. Randolph Quark was one of the first in the contemporary period to discuss varieties of English and the notion of the standards of the world English in 1962 in the book The Use of English. Look, while we talk about this specific name, Randolph Quark, we say that he was the first one in the contemporary period to discuss the varieties of English, who had first time discussed what the varieties of English, as well as this was his first thing, and the second issue that he discussed was the notion of the standards of the world English. That what is the standard of the world English? This was actually the main question, main issue of debate in his, and this is what he has discussed in his book, The Use of English. His Grammar of Contemporary English also surveyed varieties of English, although here the aim was to differentiate the common core of the language from such classes of variety as regional, educational, social, etc. So his work, he is the first one who has formally studied the varieties of English as well as the notion of the standards of world Englishes. Quark, the same writer, he later in 1990s assumed the role of a guardian of international standards of English. He assumed the role of a guardian as if he was regarded the guardian. He was regarded as the father. He was regarded as the caretaker of what? Of international standards of English, and was drawn into a celebrated debate with Kachru on liberation linguistics. But one obvious irony here is that Quark seems to have begun his academic life as a linguistic liberal, with his 1962 essay arguing for tolerance and noting that. Yes, there are some works of Quark that are really very famous. He has been regarded as the father of father of modern English, the father of world English, is the person who has discussed this notion in detail. He actually argued very beautifully in his book that English is not the prerogative or the possession of English. Acknowledging this must, as a corollary, involve our questioning the propriety of claiming that English of one area is more correct than the English of another. Certainly, we must realize that there is no single correct English and no single standard of correctness. Very beautifully and very correctly said. We must realize that there is no single correct English and no single standard of correctness. Because he says that English is not the prerogative or the possession of English. While we talk about English language, there are some misconceptions in our mind that English language is perhaps the possession, it's the property of the English people. No, he says that it must be accepted that yes, it belongs to them, it is there, it is actually, they are a part of it, but they are not the whole. They are a part, they are just one part, but they are not the whole. There are some other factors as well. So he said that we must realize that there is no single correct English. Means we must not attach derogation with some other regional variety of English language over the standard variety of English. As for example, if we look at our Pakistani English, sometimes it is the dilemma of our nation. Our nation, our people, what they usually do, they are not very much confident about themselves. They would really feel ashamed of the English that they are speaking. But actually the reality is that there is no notion of correctness. Nobody knows that which language is correct and which language is not correct. And why to stigmatize one specific language? Although that is the same variety of that English, it must be standardized according to Quirk. Some 20 years on, his 1990 paper was to see him arguing a rather different case, urging overseas teachers of English to keep in constant touch with the native speakers' norms and praising the merits of a world standard English. See how the different views are given by Quirk, how his ideas are changing. Firstly, 20 years back, he was saying that there is no single standard correct English, no standard English, and the due honor and the due prestige must be given to all the varieties of the English, because no one has a right to impart or to pass any judgment about any other thing. But the thing is that while they talk about, they say about the native speakers. Later on, there was one essay where he himself was arguing, and he was saying that there are some native speakers' norms. The standards are there, norms are there, and there are the native speakers, and the other varieties of Englishes that are emerging all around the world. They must stay in touch with them, and they must look for the betterment, and they must look up to those standardized languages in order to get themselves promoted, in order to get themselves to come up to good level. This is a shift in his thoughts and in his talks. In the mid-1980s, a number of the books on the world Englishes in the English studies traditions were published, including Bushfield's influential The English Language. There were different books that were published. Each of these attempted to address issues related to the learning and the use of English from a global perspective. Now, what was happening? Actually, people were looking that what are the main issues, what are the main things, that whether it should be learned from it should be learned, or it should not, whether English language should be learned or whether it should not be learned. Bushfield in 1985, he attracted much attention when he discussed the possible fragmentation English along the lines earlier seen with the Latin. Bushfield's, let's see what was the contribution of Bushfield and what did he say. Bushfield's comparison of the dispersal of Latin in the Middle Ages with the English in the 1980s provided the starting point for the Quirk's discussion of the English language in a global context. Now there was another person came, and then they started a cross comparison in their talks, in which Quirk argues the case for the normativity. Look, what is Quirk arguing? Quirk is arguing the case for the normativity, declaiming at one point that the fashion of undermining belief in standard English has worked or effected educational damage in the English as a native language countries, and there is no justification for such an attitude to be exported to the societies where English has the status of a second or the foreign language. See what he was saying. He was arguing for the case of normativity. Normativity, I told you earlier that Quirk is saying that normativity is important. Normativity, this word is derived from norm. From norm. Norm is the standard of something. Quirk, he is saying, talking about the standard. He said the standard must be acquired, because otherwise the rest, the varieties of Englishes that are emerging in the rest of the world, they would get spoiled. They are not going to follow it then. The relatively narrow range of the purposes for which the non-native needs to use English is arguably well catered by a single monochrome standard from that looks as good on paper as it sounds in the speech. So he continuously brought a shift in his thoughts and he started paying more emphasis on on the standard Englishes rather than the world Englishes, and he was in the favor that yes, there must be one standard English, and the rest of the Englishes, the world Englishes that are promoting, they must get they must start following that standard English. By the mid-1980s, it seemed that Quirk had transcended the linguistic radicalism of his youth, and that he was anxious to join battle on behalf of the both standard English and the standards of English. Now he was so much in this favor of the standards of English that is starting a kind of debate with the people. In 1985, his paper also represent. In 1985, his paper also represents a rehearsal for a later engagement against the forces of liberation linguistics, where he started paying more focus on the liberation of linguistics rather than following the same patterns. Another significant figure in this field since the 1980s has been Tom MacArthur, as we just talked, and he the founding and the current editor of English Today and the Oxford Companion to English Language, the editor of the Oxford Companion to English Language of the dictionary. He actually said that these were the things that he discussed. If there are by now English literatures, can the English languages be far behind? Actually, this line reminds me of a very famous line by an English poet, where he says that if winter comes, can spring be far behind? If winter comes, can spring be far behind? Same is the case with the English. He is talking that if there by now English literatures, can the English languages be far behind? Can he's actually looking at the expansion of English languages and the acceptance of the different English languages that were rising, that are rising very with a great speed in this modern world as well. Over the 2 decades, English Today has had a substantial impact on the discussion and debate about English languages around the world, with many articles. While others have dealt with such issues as the corpus language, actually the debate that he was presenting, it was more about the English languages rather than the world Englishes. MacArthur has also influenced the scholarship on the world Englishes greatly with his editorship of the Oxford Companion to English Language. He has also he has been writing dictionary. He has been a great influential writer in the contemporary world. The third important name who has done their work in the approaches to in the English studies approaches to world Englishes, who have worked around 1980s and 1990s. The name was Gourlach, whose orientation has described as the study of the varieties of English in a worldwide context. See what is his focus. His focus is the study of the varieties of English. He was more interested in the study of the varieties of English in a worldwide context. In a worldwide context, globally, in the global context, they are going to look at the importance of this study varieties of English. Gourlach's intellectual lineage was derived from Anglistic in the German academic tradition, and he rose to prominence in the field as the founding editor of English Worldwide. He was a founding editor of this book. It was published in 1980, and it publishes a wide range of articles. See what was his important work about. He wrote articles about dialectology, Pidgin and Creoles, and the sociolinguistics of English throughout the world. These were the 3 main important points of discussion in Gourlach. He discussed dialectology. Dialectology is again the regional varieties of English languages that represent. He also discussed the Pidgin and Creoles. Pidgins and creoles were once again those things it's about the language, you know, the first in this the languages of that are spoken for the sake of some purpose. And then he also studied in detail the sociolinguistics of English throughout the world. Sociolinguistics, the aspect, the cultural and the societal aspect of English throughout the world on that was present in the world. Gourlage himself has identified his approach as part of English studies, commenting that as a sub-discipline of English studies, a consideration of English as a English language would provide an ideal opportunity to expand the historical, social and geographical aspects of English studies, and it might well serve to enhance the appeal of traditional and somewhat aging disciplines. See, what are his views? He is saying that as a sub-discipline of English studies, that overall the world Englishes are what? They are a sub-discipline of English studies, and the consideration of English as a world language would provide an ideal opportunity to expand the social, historical, geographical aspects of English studies. If the people are going to look at it, if the people are going to analyze it from the sociolinguistics point of view, definitely they are going to study language in relation to society. That is the definition of sociolinguistics. So this was the main the main work of Gourlage that was done in the field of this, the English studies approach to world Englishes. There were some other works that were also done, and then a very, very important name, as I told you earlier, is that of Crystal's work. Early work, they centered on academically oriented English studies. More of the Crystal's work, David Crystal's work, it was on academically oriented English studies, but by the mid 1980s, Crystal was moving away from the detailed empirical research and embarking on his present career of academic entrepreneurship, encyclopedist, broadcaster and popularizer. He was looking at different things. Another important name, Greenbaum. In his book, The English Language Today, it was a very, very important work of that time. He directed actually International Corpus of English research project, which is being run in around 15 countries worldwide. There was a research project that was going on about the world Englishes, that one research project that was carried on almost over the 15 countries of the world. He was the person, Greenbaum, who was directing it, who was the leader in it. So he was again a very great scholar, and he has contributed towards the study of towards the English the study of world Englishes. The name of some other scholars are also written. The Birchfield, about which we have already looked at it in detail as well. From the United States, there were further contributions to the study of the varieties of English. Worldwide have also come from like Algeo, Bailey, Frederick Cassidy. These were some people from some other countries who were contributing. Now we are moving on to the second approach, the socio-linguistic approaches to world Englishes. Before this, we have looked at the English studies approach to the world Englishes, and now we are going to put our emphasis on the sociolinguistic approaches to the world Englishes. Let me just define you that what is sociolinguistics. Sociolinguistics is the study of language in relation to society. One important point to remember about sociolinguistics is that our main focus, it is a study of language. We are focusing on language. We are reading language, but where we are reading language in relation to society. We are seeing that how different societies are making an impact, how different components of a society, how different pillars of a society are making a difference on English language, on this variety of world Englishes. So this is sociolinguistics. And a very little thing, another addition to this thing is that there is actually one more study that is known as sociology. If it is actually a thing of emphasis, if we are emphasizing on language rather than the society, it means that we are studying it under sociolinguistics. But if we are going to look at society, more on society rather than the language, that study would be known as sociology. Then that will not be sociolinguistics, because within linguistics the main focus, the main point would be the language. And the other factors that contribute towards the development and the growth of language are looked into with respect to the society and the culture where it is being spoken. Let's see what does this sociolinguistic approaches to world English is may be regarded as subsuming four types of studies. There were actually the four main types of studies that were present in the sociolinguistic approaches. The first one was the sociology of language. Yes. And firstly, let me tell you that who were the main people. The main linguists who were studying this sociology of language, they were actually Fishman, Cooper and Conrad, Fishman, Conrad and Lopez. These are very, very big name in the field of sociolinguistics. They are the linguists, and their main focus was on the sociology of language. Sociology of language. They were trying to explore all the social aspects that a language can have, all the societal things that a language can do. So the first emphasis within the sociolinguistic approaches to world Englishes, the first emphasis would be on the sociology of language, and the important names are Conrad, Lopes and Cooper. Then let's come to the second aspect. This is features based approaches to the world Englishes. Features based. There are while we are saying that in sociolinguistics our emphasis is on language in with respect to the society. Fine. If we are looking at the language, so what we are trying to do, we are features based approaches to world Englishes. We are trying to explore the feature based approaches. The features based approaches to world Englishes, we are looking at the individual characteristic features that a language can have while language is playing its role in the society and the culture. That is a feature based approach. And the main names that come are Treadgill and Hanna. This is a very important name. This is a very they're very eminent linguists in the field of sociolinguistics. Then Ketchruvian studies. Ketchruvian studies. We have discussed a bit of these studies earlier as well regarding world Englishes, and we have said that Ketchrew has given his circle theory, and circle theory, circle theory was about language, it was about the society, so it comes under the approach of sociolinguistic. Then the next is Pidgins and Creole studies. Pidgins and Creoles, these are again these are actually the terminologies, these are the jargons of sociolinguistics. In our previous lectures, when we were discussing different Pidgins and Creoles, Actually, the main title of that lecture was about the varieties of English. These are different varieties, they are known as variety, and these were actually the very important, the main concepts in the study of sociolinguistics. And within, if we are talking about the sociolinguistic approaches to English languages, we are saying that there is Pidgin and Creole study, and it is very, very important. Then some applied linguistic approaches. Let me first define that what applied linguistics is. Applied linguistics is when we are practically trying to apply the concepts of language, the concepts of linguistics, it is known as applied linguistics. Simply the application, applied is from application, application of the studies of linguistics. If we are saying that we in sociolinguistics we are reading the varieties, in applied linguistics we are going to look at the application of these varieties of English language. Yes, we were discussing some applied linguistic approaches, and I was telling you that applied linguistics is what it is actually about, the application of linguistics. Application of linguistics where as I have given you example that in sociolinguistics, if we look at the variety, so in applied linguistics we are going to apply this concept on practically apply and then practically see that what are its results. One of the first applied linguistic approaches to the varieties of World English began in 1960s with the work of Halliday, McIntosh and Stevens. Great name, a great name that comes in the study of applied linguistics is that of Halliday. Halliday Hassan. Halliday is a linguist, is a world-renowned Australian linguist who has worked extensively on applied linguistics. In our upcoming lecture, we'll be looking at his contribution, a bit contribution towards applied linguistics. But just for the time being, just to tell you that he has been a great linguist of the world. He actually what did it? Who sought to apply insights derived from the linguistic sciences to the newly emergent field of applied linguistics. They tried to apply insights derived from the linguistic sciences. Deriving from the linguistic sciences, they were trying to apply it. As I told you, that applied linguistics is more about application, where they are trying to apply it to the newly emergent field of applied linguistics, which in Britain and the USA was broadly concerned with the theories of language learning, language teaching and language pedagogy. Whereas the main branches that come under applied linguistics are these: theories of language learning, because this is more about the practical implications of language, that how a language is learned, what are the practical processes that are involved. Then language teaching, how a language is taught, what are the pedagogical aspects, and language pedagogy, the teaching and the learning of language, how language is taught, what are different methods that are used and that should be used depending upon the learner's psychology. So all these areas would come in the applied linguistics. So these concepts were being studied, these were the basic approaches that were being carried out to study the world Englishes, the concept of world Englishes. The use of the varieties of English around the world, noting that during the period of colonial rule, it seemed totally obvious and immutable that the form of English used by the professionals people in England was the only conceivable model for use in education overseas. When there was a colonial rule that was going on, colonial rule, who were the rulers? The Britishers. While the Britishers were in the rule, it seemed totally obvious and immutable that the form of English used by the professional in the England was the only conceivable model. Definitely when Britishers are in rule, they are the rest of the people are going to think yes, whatever they are speaking, that is a standardized variety. So the people were trying to adapt that, people were trying to replicate the same thing, the same language. By the 1960s, they argued things were really very different, and now there was choice available between American, British, Australian, and other regional variants. Thus they argue, and this has a contemporary ring, that English is no longer the possession of the British. Yes, see what a great movement, that English is now no longer the possession of the Britishers or even the British and the Americans, but an international language which increasing number of people adopt for at least some of their purposes. In West Africa, in the West Indies, and Pakistan and India, it is no longer accepted by the majority that the English of England with RP, received pronunciation, as its accent, are the only possible models of English to be set before the young. So true. Even right now, the things are changing so rapidly, although initially we used to say that there is the standard English that is being pronounced only in England is the correct and appropriate language. But now the traditions are changing. We are no more at the same place, we are no more at the same level of English. Perhaps we the English that we are speaking these days in our country, it might be much better than those who are speaking in their native country, because in their native country it is quite different. The formal language that they use is quite different, and the spoken that they use is quite different. So, but as we are a product who has always had a standard British English, but now we ourselves have started coming on to those standards, and we are perhaps following their rules more than they themselves are following. The publication of the Halliday, McIntosh and Stevens' book and the expression of the similar viewpoints in the academic papers prompted Clifford Prater to publish a spirited yet historically misplaced attack on what he called the British heresy in the tassel. Actually, there was one work that was presented by the Prater, and he called it the British heresy. Heresy means heresy in English, it means a rumor. A person who just guesses something and who just spreads it. The paper is of interest because it predates the Kachru, and also because of the fact that some of the issues that it raises are still discussed today. The issues that were discussed in that paper are really very important because they are the contemporary issues, they are the issues of the modern day English. Prater's central argument is that, look at the central argument of Prater, in a country where English is not spoken natively but is widely used as the medium of instruction. In a country where English is not spoken natively but is widely used as a medium of instruction, for example, as in our country, to set up the local variety of English as the ultimate model to be intimated by those learning the language. To set up a local variety of English, that we ourselves in our country where English is used as a language of instruction, as a language of where we use it just for the sake of instructions, what we can do, we can actually set up a local variety of English as the ultimate model, arising out of these local Englishes that we are speaking. Let's say in Pakistan, we ourselves can set up one model, and then we can say, okay ji, this model is okay, and we can follow this model, and that would be all right. Is unjustifiable intellectually and not conducive to the best possible results. Sometimes he says that this is unjustifiable intellectually. If we ourselves are getting if we ourselves are coming up to some standardized notations, if we are coming to some standardized options of the language, then what is happening actually, we are saying that this is unjustifiable intellectually. They say it is not accepted intellectually and not conducive. It is perhaps not practical, it is not implementable to the best possible results, because people are going to get distracted, people are going to get vanished from the right path. The language that we are speaking, actually, it can be an amalgamation of different words, and perhaps the words, if we don't follow the right standard English, it can lead us, perhaps after a few years, the upcoming generation would be totally at lost, because of the mistakes, because of different things that we'll be doing in the language. He identifies 7 fallacies associated with the British heresy. That the second language varieties of English can legitimately be equated with the mother tongue varieties. Yes, there were the 7 actually false concepts that this writer has pointed out. The fallacies means the false concepts, the wrong concepts, the misconceptions. That second language varieties of English can legitimately be equated with the mother tongue varieties. He said that it is a legitimate right, it is legalized way of equating it with the mother tongue variety. The second language varieties of English really exist as coherent, homogeneous linguistic systems, describable in the usual way as the speech of an identifiable social groups. Second language varieties of English really exist as coherent. They really exist as coherent, homogeneous linguistic systems. Homogeneous means the same linguistic system. They are describable in the usual way as the speech of an identifiable social groups. That a few minor concessions in the type of English taught in the schools would tend to or suffice to stabilize the language. That a few minor concessions, if we are letting it go, if we are allowing the students to make a few of the mistakes, a few of the concessions, we are giving them leniency in the use of English language, it would tend to or suffice to stabilize the language. Perhaps it can also prove good in some way. That one level of a language, its phonology, can be allowed to change without entailing corresponding changes at other levels. They said that one level can be changed, but not all the levels. That it would be a simple matter to establish a second language variety of English as an effective instructional model once it had been clearly identified and described. They say that it would be a simpler matter to establish a second language variety. We are saying that if we are going to have one model language in our Pakistan, so that would be a second variety of English language that will not be perhaps like the same as that will not be like the standard English. The students would long be content to study English in a situation in which, as a matter of policy, they were denied access to a native speaker model. Perhaps there can be some kind of problems if they are not if the students who are not given exposure to the native language, they may go astray. They may grow astray, they may go wrong. Granting a second language variety of English official status in a country's schools would lead to its widespread adoption as a mother tongue. Definitely, if we are saying that the English that I am speaking, let's say today, it is acceptable, it must be standardized only in Pakistani context. If I would say that it is standardized, then what would happen actually? People would say, okay, this is quite easy, we can easily go through with it. People would start acquiring it, or the upcoming generations would start acquiring it as their first language. These were different fallacies that were discovered. Then comes Peter Stevens, and he actually said that he argued for a varieties-based approach to TESOL and TEFL during his academic career. Varieties-based approach. to TESOL. TESOL, teaching of English as a second language, and TEFL, teaching of English as a foreign language. He said that there must be a variety-based approach. A variety that could have many things. Both his 1977 book New Orientations in the Teaching of English and his 1980 volume Teaching English as an International Language gave substantial coverage to what he glosed as localized form of English. Later on he gave a new variety, and then moving beyond these ideas, I am moving on to the next approach, that is a lexicographical approach. Before this we have looked at the applied linguistics approach. Applied is actually the application, and we have seen that how many people have given their insights and their views about the world English is. Some say that okay, the world English is every variety, they can have their own standard variety and then they can go on following, but the other person would say no, it is not okay, because in this way they would spoil the standard language or the things like that. Let's see that what this lexical approach has got to say regarding English language. The domestic dictionary tradition, as an exemplified by the Samuel Johnson's, according to Samuel Johnson, there are the two main principles in the lexicographical approach. Let me first explain that what is lexicographical. Lexico, the words. Lexicographical, or the approach that is related to the words and the word formation, about the collection of the vocabulary. Lexicographical means the vocabulary of a language. There are the two main principles. The potential of the dictionary is for fixing and standardizing the language. However, unrealistic this might turn out to be. They say that there is the potential, there is the advantage that perhaps the dictionaries can fix up and standardize a few vocabulary items of the language, but sometimes it is not possible to do so. The identification of a nucleus or the core of the language defined according to Anglicity. We can sometimes say that okay ji, if we are speaking one variety of English in our Pakistan, that is English variety, and there is one accepted one, there will be nucleus, and the rest of the languages that are being spoken, there would be the core, the rest of the things. Arguably, the first dictionaries of the world Englishes were glossaries produced in the United States. While we look at the lexicography, we say that we are looking at the dictionary items, because dictionary is a compilation of the vocabulary bank of the language. Noah Webster's came, he was concerned to produce a national dictionary, and for reasons partly if not wholly political, he said that as an independent nation, our honor requires us to have a system of our own in a language as well as government. There are the two main points that Webster discussed about the vocabulary items and regarding world Englishes. He said that as an independent nation, as if British are the independent nation, so it is necessary for them, it is mandatory for them to have their own systems and system of language. One is a system of language, because if a nation has one independent system of language, they can grow as much as is imaginable. Webster further predicted that the causes will produce in a course of time a language in North America as different from the future language of England as the modern Dutch, Danish and Swedish. His first dictionary appeared early in the 19th century in 1806, but it was not until 1828 that his major work was published. In the 20th century, Webster's was complemented by a number of other works on American English. He was working, and there were some other people who were also very famous in those days. Earlier dictionaries of Canadian English were also about to be published in 1999. A very famous English dictionary is that of Canadian Oxford English, and it came and it superseded the dictionary that was present before. Then while we are talking about lexicography, we are talking about the art of writing dictionary, we are talking about the vocabulary bank of dictionary. Now we are looking at the standardized variety of English, and we are saying that Australian lexicography can be traced back to the Morris. While we talk about Australia, because within Australia English language is once again the native language, is once again the standardized language. So the lexicography, the art of writing a dictionary within Australia, it refers back to Morris, which was intended as a supplement to OED, to Old English period, and to Old English dictionary, and to list that Lake compiled as a supplement to the Webster's work. Yes, there were different works that were done in Australia and New Zealand, being the native countries in English. Now South Africa has its own dictionary tradition, starting with the Patman. South Africa, another native country of English, they also have their own native tradition of English. And then we come towards the smaller regions. Let's talk about India. They developed their own tradition of glossaries and the word list. And then later on, there were two more people who has worked in the South Asian societies. In the West Africa, there have been plans for a number of years to complete a dictionary, but so far the project has not been completed. The efforts are being done, but still it's not completed. For the Caribbean, there is a dictionary of Jamaican English. Some other dictionaries have been introduced for that specific region. Dictionaries are profoundly important for the recognition of the world Englishes, definitely, because they are going to have a vocabulary bank of that specific language, and by looking at that language we can get to know about the variety of that language, about that origin, about certain facts of language. By the 1990s, the editors of Macquarie had also become activists for the promotion of the world Englishes in Asia, and are now planning a dictionary focusing on the English in the Asian region, with extensive coverage of the vocabularies of the new Englishes of Southeast Asia. So the same efforts, the efforts that were done in the Europe are now also being done are also in the progress to be done in Asia, and there is a struggle going on to compile up all the varieties of the new English variety of South Asian English languages, to compile them in the form of dictionary. The efforts are being really done. Then there are a few words about dictionary that are about Butler, from Butler, that this dictionary will shift attitudes in the region to English. Rather than being seen as an alien language and a conduit of Western culture, it will be evident that English can express Asian culture. Yes, the efforts where they are trying to put new emerging words of English language within this Asian culture, what they would do, it would actually help them in identifying the culture, the Asian culture, very easily. The flexibility of English, its ability to serve as a vehicle for the expression of local culture, has been one of its greatest characteristics since it left English shores. Now, end word, and for the end of this presentation, I would say that significance of the world Englishes for the applied linguistics in the wider sense is really very, very profound. It's really very, very wider, and it challenges the discipline to come to the terms with a wide range of issues, descriptive and theoretical, linked to the unprecedented impact of English throughout the world. Yes, the importance of world Englishes, it cannot be denied, from not only from the theoretical perspective but also from the practical perspective. People, apart from the theories and the approaches that are presented, people have started working on it practically, and some practical results are being shown. Current estimates suggest that there are now an estimated 375 million Jews of English in the inner circle. We have already discussed this thing. Virtually even every Asian city has an English language newspapers, and many societies in the region also provide English language programs on radio and television. So this is very, very true. Even we look at our own country, we look at our own variety of world English, we say yes, there are the English newspapers, there are some programs in English on radio and television both. It is an important pan-Asian lingua franca in the business world, so that for example, when a factory manager from the Vietnam sells garments to a Singapore merchandiser, the language of the choice is usually English. Exactly, when from one region the trades are being done, the business is being done to some other specific region, what would be the mode? The mode would be English, and this is an emergence of world Englishes. The dominant trend over recent decades is that more and more Asian people are speaking and more English, and they are speaking it mainly to other Asians. See, this is the dominant trend. This is what is becoming very prominent everywhere in the Asian countries. The vast majority of the teachers of English as a second and foreign language in the world today, they are non-native. Yes, it is quite acknowledged truth that it is being accepted now as well. Even there are the if we are going to appoint the teachers of ESL or EFL, they are non-native. They are not native necessarily. They are not from Britain. They are not from Australia, UK, USA, from South. From those regions. Rather, they are non-native. They are, let's say, they are trained in their own country in such a beautiful way that nobody can see the difference. Teachers working in a wide range of setting in outer circle and expanding circle societies. The number of secondary school teachers of English in China alone now totals around 500,000. Look how a large number it is. In outer circle, Asian societies such as Hong Kong, India, Malaysia, Singapore and the Philippines, as well as a host of African societies, such teachers operate in socio-linguistic context where English has established de facto international norms. The teachers who are although not native, yet they are so proficient, they are so fluent in the use of English language that they are being appointed as ESL and EFL teachers. In situations such as these, the maintenance of traditional target norms of English proficiency may not only lack realism but may also contribute to the stigmatization of the norms of the local users. Yes, and even in this situation, when there are so many world Englishes that are rising, and if we say that no, there is just one standard, we have to follow that. The rest of the languages are of no importance. They are ashamed that they must not be spoken. No, this is not the way. There can come a question on the standard of English right now, because of there is so much emergence of English languages, of world Englishes all over. In addition, the nativization of English in many such societies has been accompanied by the Englishization of many indigenous languages, leading to complex patterns of contact linguistics, including lexical transfer, chord switching, chord mixing, and discoursal and syntactic change and accommodation. Yes, the English has become such a great part of, if we talk only of our culture, you can see that English has become such a great part of ourselves. Perhaps it is impossible to impart it from us. You would say, if we are talking in Urdu, if we are talking in Punjabi, we will be using, the persons who are illiterate, the person who don't know anything about English, even then they unconsciously would be using the words of English. This is really the nativization. This is the localization of English language. At the same time, despite the greater recognition accorded to the English of Africa and Asia in recent years, considerable problems for the applied linguistics still exist in the area of pedagogic principles and the practices. There was a literary paper in 1996 by Kachru and Nelson, and they have actually, while they were talking about the academic settings, they said that there is multicultural education, the teaching of the discourse pragmatics and the teaching of the new literatures in the English is really very much prevalent in these days. Brown in 2000, he surveys the resources for the research and teaching in the field and suggests a range of research and the applied agendas for the world Englishes. Yes, at an individual level, the English language now plays an important role in the lives of rapidly increasing a proportion of the world's population. Yes, you know that this is not only in the academic setting, rather it is being accepted individually. Individually, it has got such a great impact on us that we cannot say anything. So with this we come to an end so with this we come towards the end of our today's lecture, and let me give you a quick summary. We have actually firstly I started my lecture today with a brief overview of the world Englishes. We have looked at the world Englishes from different perspectives. We said that there are different things about this there are different interpretations. It is a word that is open to the interpretations, and then we said that there are different approaches that would help us in the study of world Englishes. The first approach was the English studies approach to the world Englishes. Then we have looked at the sociolinguistic approach. We have also looked at the applied linguistic approach. We have looked at the lexicographical approach. Then towards the end we have looked at some of the conclusions of some scientific studies and the researches that were done in this field. So with this, let me end it here. For the please take very good care of yourself, and we'll see you again in the next lecture. Till then, take care and Allah Hafiz.